The ñ, that unique letter, which is an integral part of the Spanish alphabet, is much more than just a graphic symbol you're simply used to. But over the centuries, it has become the symbol that represents an entire language and a distinctive mark that clearly identifies us Spanish speakers all over the world. But what is the origin of this unique grapheme? Find out what's behind the history, the emergence and evolution of this letter, and why it became so indispensable in our language. To understand the history of the letter ñ, we have to go back in time to the Middle Ages, when Latin was the dominant language on the Iberian Peninsula, and the proto-dialects that would later shape the languages spoken in the region today were beginning to emerge. In classical Latin, the combination of two n's was common to represent the sound of a longer or sustained n. However, over time, and with the evolution of the Romance languages of the peninsula, this double consonant began to be pronounced in a more nasal and palatal way, giving rise to a unique sound that did not exist in original Latin and also did not have a precise graphic representation in its alphabet. And it was precisely the sound of the current ñ. This pronunciation feature was not exclusive to Castilian, but was common in almost all the Romance dialects that were forming in Western Europe. For this reason, we also find this same sound in other languages derived from Latin, such as French, Italian, Catalan, and Portuguese, among others. The medieval scribes who lived on the Iberian Peninsula, faced with the need to represent this new sound, began to experiment with different spellings. Initially, around the 9th century, these scribes had adopted the original Latin form with a double N to represent the rising 9 sound. In this way, it was common to write caña, año, and doña with this double N. These scribes were mainly monk copyists who were practically among the few who knew how to read and write in medieval societies. So most of ancient culture was passed down through the work of these religious men. Later on, they began to abbreviate this form, and some of the most common solutions included overlapping one N over another, which quickly evolved into adding a small stroke to the N, known as a tilde. In order to save parchment, since it was really expensive at that time, and to simplify the arduous work of transcription. Additionally, the use of abbreviations was quite common in writing at that time. In current bibliographic records, one of the earliest uses of the Einschreibung can be traced in the parchments of the Fuero de Alfambra from the year 1176. However, these changes began to cause a major problem and chaos in writing, since in the same text you could find different ways to represent the sound of the 9, whether by using double N, the newly formed letter nian, a small n over another n, or even the form gn adopted in French and Italian. But this confusion came to an end thanks to the spelling reform imposed by King Alfonso X, known as El Sabio. Following his policy of linguistic unification, he created the first rules of our language. At the same time, other combinations of the letter N with certain diphthongs were also beginning to evolve into this sound. In this way, words like Hispania, Montaña, or Aranea gave rise to the modern forms España, Montaña, and Arena. It was only from the 13th century onward that the newly formed letter 9 began to be used more widely. This new spelling, which as we mentioned earlier consisted of an N with its corresponding tilde, quickly became established as the standard representation of the palatal nasal sound in the Castilian language, which was already part of a large number of words used in daily life. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell to remind you when there's a new video. A couple of centuries later, during the 14th century, its use had spread throughout every corner of Spanish territory. So the humanist grammarian and lexicographer Antonio de Nebrija officially included it in his book. The grammar of 1492 considered the first true grammar of the Castilian language. In 1803, the Royal Spanish Academy finally officially incorporated it into the alphabet and dictionaries, thus establishing it triumphantly in the Spanish language. Castilian, along with Galician and Asturian, adopted the letter 9 both in writing and pronunciation. While Portuguese implemented the NH combination, French and Italian chose to use GN, and Catalan decided on the NY combination, just like Aragonese. However, the grapheme NY came to represent Castilian in the international sphere almost exclusively due to its greater political influence and expansion across 5 continents. Today, there are more than 15,700 words in Spanish that contain the letter 9, and among these words, more than 350 begin with this consonant. But the Yinch hasn't always had an easy path in history. Even recently, in the 1990s of the 20th century, the use of this letter was seriously threatened by the European Economic Community, who, in an act described by many as an outburst of arrogance and cultural disdain, was about to get computer manufacturers to remove the NIN key from keyboards and other technological devices. An act that the Real Academia Española itself described as an attack. And thanks to the intervention of great literary figures like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Mario Vargas Llosa, and Fernando Lázaro Carreter, among others, they managed to thwart this initiative. The debate over the preservation of the letter NIN came to an end with the approval by the Spanish government of a royal decree in 1993. This decree, supported by the cultural exceptions included in the Maastricht Treaty, ensured the continued presence of the na on computer keyboards, thus consolidating its place in our linguistic heritage. Before we finish, we almost forgot to mention something very important. As we have already explained before, neither the letter ni nor the phoneme it represents are exclusive to Spanish. Since in the Iberian Peninsula, besides Castilian, Galician, Asturian, and to a lesser extent Basque, use it. But in case you didn't know, in Hispanic America, numerous indigenous languages such as Mixtec, Zapotec, Otomi, Quechua, Aymara, Mapuche, and Guarani also include it in their alphabets. Thanks to the cultural influence that Spanish has had on these languages, and there's more. Beyond our continent, we find the Nanja in languages as diverse as Papiamento from Curaçao, Tagalog, and Chabacano from the Philippines, Bubi from Equatorial Guinea, the Chamorro from Guam, Crimean Tatar, Malay, Nauruan, and in several languages of Senegal, such as Wolof, where it is used to represent the same nasal sound as in Spanish. Even in the Tetum language of East Timor, the in was adopted to represent Portuguese loanwords originally written with the naj. In summary, you should feel proud of the letter 9, since it can be considered the quintessential Spanish letter and the identification of an entire cultural universe, crossing borders, races, and nations. And you? What's your favorite word with "nai"? Write your opinion in the comment box, and thank you for joining us in this mini documentary. And that's all for today. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to this channel. I invite you to also activate the bell so you'll be notified when there's a new video. See you soon.